Marissa Talbot left her home on West Fernwood Avenue in Dayton, Ohio. She was 17 years old. Witnesses later confirmed she wore a gray hoodie, jeans, and carried a second-hand olive green backpack. She told her mother she had found a babysitting job through a flyer taped to the window of a nearby Speedway gas station. The flyer offered $50 for one evening of childcare, cash in hand. The woman advertising the job identified herself only as Sharon, and the contact number led to an unregistered prepaid phone. According to her mother, Danielle Talbot, Marissa exchanged a series of text messages with Sharon and agreed to meet her at a property located on Crystal Hollow Road, a wooded, semi-rural street west of the city limits. The house in question was locally referred to as the Kruger property, a name left over from a family that had once lived there but moved away years earlier. Marissa promised to be back by midnight. She never returned. The following morning, Danielle attempted to reach her daughter. Multiple calls went straight to voicemail. By then, Marissa's phone had not transmitted any signal since 6:42 p.m. the night before. Cell tower data showed its final ping near the outskirts of Crystal Hollow Road, in proximity to the Kruger property. Despite the concern, no missing persons report was filed until Sunday afternoon, nearly 20 hours later. Investigators with the Dayton Police Department responded to the initial call. The house on Crystal Hollow Road appeared unoccupied. Officers noted that the mailbox was full, trash cans were overturned, and the grass in front had not been cut for several weeks. A trailer was parked in the rear of the property, though no individuals were encountered during the initial canvass. The front door was locked. With no evidence of immediate danger, police had no grounds to enter the residence at that time. Marissa's personal life came under scrutiny early in the investigation. She had no driver's license and was not enrolled in any after-school activities. Friends described her as private and restless. Some classmates said she had recently talked about moving out once she turned 18. At home, the environment was unstable. Her mother, Danielle, had a history of prescription drug misuse and had not held consistent employment in the past 3 years. Marissa's stepfather, Russ Talbot, had prior interactions with law enforcement, 2 domestic disturbance calls in 2018 and 1 noise complaint in spring 2019. Russ was brought in for questioning on October 21st. He told detectives that he hadn't seen Marissa leave the house that Saturday evening, stating that he had been drinking and watching college football. His alibi could not be independently verified, but there was no physical evidence connecting him to the disappearance. Officers conducted a preliminary search of the Talbot residence. Marissa's bedroom contained her personal hygiene items, a small amount of cash hidden in a sock drawer, and several school notebooks. Her coat was missing. So was her backpack. Her phone remained untraceable after the final ping on Crystal Hollow Road. Over the next several weeks, the investigation slowed. No confirmed sightings were reported. The phone number associated with Sharon remained inactive. Attempts to trace its activation led nowhere. The device had been purchased in cash at a discount store on Salem Avenue, with no surveillance footage retained due to the delay in reporting. Police interviewed nearby residents on Crystal Hollow Road. Most said they believed the house had been empty for months. One neighbor recalled seeing a woman in her 40s on the porch around early October, but could not remember specific dates or details. Another neighbor said he occasionally saw someone cutting the grass, a man driving an older red pickup, but had not seen the vehicle since late fall. By early December, no new leads had surfaced. With no body, no eyewitnesses, and no suspect, the case was reclassified as a possible runaway. Internally, the department was divided. Some detectives expressed doubt that Marissa would have left behind her belongings, including her personal savings and toiletries. Others pointed to her unstable home life and history of couch surfing with friends. Without evidence of abduction, the case did not qualify for federal assistance. Media coverage was minimal. The missing person flyer, issued by Dayton PD, included a basic photo and a brief description. It listed her as 5 feet 6 inches, 115 pounds, with brown hair and hazel eyes. In February 2023, renovation began at 1187 Crystal Hollow Road, a vacant property on the western edge of Dayton, Ohio. The house had been unoccupied since early 2020 and was recently purchased at a foreclosure auction. Garland's plan was typical: clear the interior, make cosmetic repairs, and resell. He hired a small construction crew to begin interior demolition, starting with the basement due to visible moisture damage and signs of previous unauthorized occupancy. On February 3rd, 2 workers removing warped paneling along the southern basement wall encountered irregular framing. Behind the paneling was a layer of loose insulation and a segment of drywall that had been screwed directly into concrete, inconsistent with the rest of the foundation. The materials appeared newer than their surroundings. Once removed, the team exposed a sealed-off cavity approximately 4 feet deep and just over 6 feet tall. The space had no light source, ventilation, or signs of any prior access since being closed. Inside the cavity, written in white chalk directly on the concrete wall, were the words, Marissa T. The name was printed in large, uneven letters. Forensic analysts later determined the chalk was a classroom-grade product common in discount school supply kits. Beneath the lettering were horizontal and diagonal scratch marks, shallow but persistent. A small rusted tin box was taped to a vertical support within the space. Inside were 3 items: a damaged prepaid mobile phone, a silver necklace with a worn M pendant, and a small bottle of pink glitter nail polish. The box had no label or markings. The site supervisor halted demolition and contacted the Dayton Police Department. Responding officers secured the property, and by evening, forensic technicians from Montgomery County were on site. Swabs were collected from wall seams, the tin box, and debris from the floor. The drywall panel that had sealed the cavity was removed intact and taken in as evidence. Within hours, DNA analysis of biological material recovered from the seams showed a partial female profile. Forensics also confirmed the presence of trace blood under residual caulk, though degraded. Marissa Talbot's missing persons file, inactive since late 2019, was reopened the same night. The necklace recovered from the tin box was shown to Marissa's mother, Danielle Talbot. She identified it as belonging to her daughter, stating that Marissa had worn the piece nearly every day and had received it as a gift from her maternal grandmother. The pendant was photographed and compared to archived personal images of Marissa, including one from her high school yearbook in which the same necklace is visible. The phone recovered was a basic prepaid model released in early 2019. Though the SIM card slot showed signs of use, the device was no longer functional due to physical damage. Its exterior and serial number matched the general description of the phone Marissa had used prior to her disappearance. Attempts to retrieve internal data were unsuccessful, though packaging remnants later recovered in a related search would connect the phone to a nearby retail store. The interior surface of the concrete wall bore faint fingernail scratches. Keratin fragments were retrieved and subjected to DNA analysis, returning a match to Marissa's 2019 toothbrush sample, previously retained by law enforcement. Detectives returned to property records. In 2019, the home had been leased to a person using the name Sharon Kruger. That name yielded no matches in Ohio DMV records or national criminal databases. The ID presented during the lease signing was later determined to be fraudulent and traced to a stolen identity from a deceased woman in Indiana. Payment records showed that the first and only rent payment had been made in cash. The landlord, who lived out of state, admitted that he had not physically visited the property during or after the brief tenancy. As investigators canvassed the neighborhood again, 2 nearby residents mentioned seeing a man in his late 30s or early 40s who occasionally mowed the lawn and removed trash from the property. One believed the man lived in a trailer situated behind the house but had not seen him since late 2019. Another recalled hearing hammering noises on and off during the week following Marissa's disappearance but had assumed renovation was underway. No one could confirm having seen Marissa at the location. Following the discovery of the sealed basement cavity in February 2023, investigators turned their attention to those associated with the Crystal Hollow Road property in late 2019. The house had been rented under the name Sharon Kruger. Initial database checks revealed no matches to a legal resident or licensed individual in Ohio. Further investigation traced the identity documents used during the lease application to a deceased woman in Indiana whose personal information had been used in multiple cases of fraud. This confirmed that the woman calling herself Sharon had assumed a stolen identity. The rental was paid in cash, with no direct bank or employment links. Surveillance data from the gas station where the babysitting flyers had been posted had long since been erased, and no active phone line remained for contact. With no verified photographs and no digital trail, the woman known as Sharon had effectively disappeared shortly after Marissa Talbot did. Interviews with neighbors turned up few details. Most could only recall that the woman kept to herself and was not seen after the fall of 2019. One noted she had moved out suddenly. Another claimed the house sat dark and unoccupied through the winter. However, one name surfaced repeatedly in follow-up interviews: Donnie Hatch. Residents referred to Hatch as someone frequently seen on the property. He had been observed mowing the lawn, clearing debris, and doing minor repairs. Some thought he was Sharon's brother. Others assumed he was a live-in partner or tenant. What was clear was that Hatch had not appeared on any lease, utility bill, or service account. There were no tax documents or rental receipts connecting him to the residence. Officers began compiling information on Hatch. His full name, Donald Ray Hatch, age 39, led to a background check that revealed a long history of low-level offenses across multiple counties. Arrest records dated back to the early 2000s and included burglary, trespassing, and receiving stolen property. A 2007 arrest in Clark County included a charge for unlawful restraint involving a female minor, but those charges were dropped before trial due to lack of evidence. Hatch had no permanent address listed on recent records. He had used various mailing addresses across Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky over a decade. He did not own property, and most of his employment was off the books. Fingerprints taken during his prior arrests were in the national database, but had not previously been matched to any materials linked to the Crystal Hollow Road investigation. In 2019, there was no active warrant for Hatch, and the lack of digital infrastructure at the rental property meant his presence had gone unverified. No official tenant screening had been conducted when the house was leased under the Kruger alias. In March 2023, police revisited all public records, DMV logs, and open-source surveillance data to determine Hatch's last known activity. They found that he had sold a red Ford pickup truck in Jefferson County, Kentucky, in early 2021. The sale had been made using a falsified name, but a VIN search linked the vehicle to a trailer that had once been parked behind the Crystal Hollow Road property. This connected Hatch physically to the location beyond anecdotal testimony. The discovery triggered a broader regional alert. By April, a partial match to Hatch's known handwriting was linked to a pawn slip associated with a silver necklace resembling the one found in the basement. This discovery would become critical in the next stage of the investigation. But at this point in the search, no verified address, employer, or current vehicle was listed under his legal name. Hatch had essentially vanished from the formal system in early 2021. In parallel, detectives reviewed the physical evidence from the Crystal Hollow Road site with fresh urgency. Forensic analysis confirmed that the drywall sealing the basement cavity had been installed using screws purchased from a local hardware store chain. A receipt was located in a Jefferson County storage unit later tied to Hatch. Paint samples taken from the sealed compartment matched cans found in that same unit, which had been rented under another alias but linked through handwriting and video records. These material connections, while circumstantial, were now forming a consistent chain. In late March 2023, detectives from Dayton PD followed a new lead centered on the silver necklace recovered from the sealed basement cavity at 1187 Crystal Hollow Road. It had been confirmed by Marissa Talbot's mother as belonging to her daughter. Forensic testing showed trace DNA on the clasp matching Marissa's profile. But the necklace also contained another clue. Its design was distinct and traced back to a limited batch of costume jewelry sold in regional discount stores across the Midwest between 2018 and 2019. This allowed investigators to begin cross-referencing pawn records in bordering states, focusing on jewelry sold within the year following Marissa's disappearance. In early April, a match was found. A necklace of the same style had been sold on March 14, 2020, to a pawn shop located on West Market Street in Louisville, Kentucky. The shop retained detailed paper logs and security footage. The transaction was recorded under the initials DH. The signature on the receipt was compared to known samples of Donnie Hatch's handwriting and determined to be a match by a forensic document examiner. Surveillance footage from the shop's camera confirmed Hatch as the seller. He was seen entering the store, transacting with the item, and exiting alone. The pawn slip, timestamped at 2:07 p.m., showed that Hatch received $12 for the necklace. While the shop did not fingerprint clients, it did retain the copy of the identification used, a state ID under one of Hatch's known aliases. This transaction, completed 5 months after Marissa's disappearance, provided the first piece of physical evidence linking Hatch to an item found at the Crystal Hollow scene. It also indicated he had retained at least one of Marissa's personal belongings long after the date she vanished. The break allowed detectives to obtain a court order to search a Jefferson County storage unit that Hatch had rented from February 2020 until December 2022. Though the unit was listed under a false name, billing records showed regular cash payments, and handwriting samples from the lease application once again matched Hatch. The search was executed on April 5, 2023. Inside, investigators recovered several items later tied to the case. Among the contents were the original packaging for a prepaid phone matching the make and model found inside the sealed utility closet, multiple rolls of fiberglass insulation, consistent with the type discovered behind the drywall at Crystal Hollow Road, 3 empty paint cans containing residue that matched the beige color used to conceal the closet panel, a purchase receipt dated October 21, 2019, 2 days after Marissa Talbot disappeared, listing drywall screws, caulk, and wall patching compound, all purchased at a home improvement store in Montgomery County. The receipt alone was significant. It showed that Hatch had acquired materials used to modify the basement area within 48 hours of Marissa's last known contact. Surveillance records from the store were no longer available, but transaction data verified the time, date, and item codes. Each piece of evidence was subjected to forensic analysis. Paint residue from the storage unit was chemically matched to paint recovered from the basement drywall. The insulation rolls were from the same manufacturer and batch lot. The prepaid phone packaging bore a partial fingerprint, which, though smudged, was consistent with a known right index print from Hatch's 2010 arrest in Allen County. None of the items could have come from a prior tenancy at the Crystal Hollow property, as the house had been unoccupied and deteriorating for years before the false lease under Sharon Kruger. Further analysis confirmed the most critical finding. Residual skin cells recovered from the inside clasp of the necklace matched Marissa Talbot's DNA profile. Additional blood traces found under a layer of caulk at the basement scene were also matched to Marissa, confirming she had suffered injury inside the house. A forensic pathologist reviewed scratch patterns on the concrete wall and concluded that they were consistent with human fingernails, several appearing worn, broken, and bloodied. Keratin fragments were recovered, and blood presence was confirmed via luminol testing. On the afternoon of May 6, 2023, a sheriff's deputy in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, initiated a traffic stop on a gray Ford Econoline van with expired Ohio plates. The vehicle had been parked near a remote turnoff off Interstate 64. When the deputy approached, the driver presented an out-of-state license that appeared legitimate at first glance. However, the registration number raised a flag in the system. A rapid identity check revealed the truth: the man was not the person listed on the ID. He was Donald Ray Hatch, 43 years old, subject of an active warrant in Ohio related to the disappearance and suspected murder of Marissa Talbot. Hatch was taken into custody without incident and transported to the Greenbrier County Sheriff's Office for questioning. A search of the vehicle was conducted under probable cause. Inside the van, deputies found a variety of survival and evasion materials. These included multiple prepaid cell phones with no SIM cards, a backpack containing unregistered credit cards, camping supplies, non-perishable food, maps of rural routes in West Virginia and Kentucky, and handwritten notes referencing storage locations and names of false identities. Among the more personal items was a small plastic pouch containing Marissa Talbot's original SIM card, missing since her phone went dark in October 2019, and a second necklace bearing an M pendant similar to the one recovered from the basement in Dayton. The contents were cataloged and forwarded to Dayton police. That same night, Hatch was transferred to a holding cell. He initially refused to speak, declining legal counsel and remaining silent for over 8 hours. The next morning, during formal interrogation by homicide detectives, Hatch made a partial admission. According to the interview transcript, he acknowledged being present at the Crystal Hollow Road property on the night Marissa Talbot disappeared. He claimed the woman calling herself Sharon had left unexpectedly and that Marissa had become agitated and frightened. He described her as panicking and said she fell and struck her head during the commotion. When pressed for details, Hatch became vague. He reportedly stated, "I just wanted to quiet her. I didn't mean for it to go that way." Detectives noted several inconsistencies. Hatch could not explain why he had remained in possession of Marissa's SIM card. He gave no account of the construction materials used to seal the utility closet or why a receipt with his handwriting had been found listing those exact items, dated just 2 days after Marissa vanished. He had no explanation for the pawn necklace in Louisville or for the matching insulation and paint can stored under his alias. More importantly, his version of events conflicted directly with forensic findings. The trace blood samples retrieved from the drywall scene showed signs of force. A pathologist confirmed that the blood pattern and density were indicative of blunt trauma rather than an accidental fall. The presence of fingernail marks and fractured keratin suggested Marissa had attempted to claw her way out. Blood residue in the lower section of the closet indicated she had been alive at the time of confinement. Hatch's claim that she had died suddenly from a head injury did not align with the physical evidence. As the investigation widened, authorities in Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia combed through Hatch's past movements. Over the prior 3 years, he had used at least 4 false identities. He had resided in trailers, campgrounds, and short-term rentals, always paying cash and leaving no digital footprint. Interviews with former employers and acquaintances painted a picture of a man who avoided stable housing, resisted documentation, and often changed locations with little notice. At no point did anyone report him for suspicious behavior, and due to his low-profile lifestyle, he remained outside the reach of traditional monitoring systems. With Hatch in custody, prosecutors in Montgomery County, Ohio, moved quickly. On May 10, 2023, he was charged with 3 felony counts: aggravated murder, kidnapping, and unlawful concealment of a corpse. Due to the location of the original crime and the presence of physical evidence linking the act to the Crystal Hollow Road property, the case would be tried in Dayton. Hatch waived extradition and was returned to Ohio under secure transport. Despite extensive searches, Marissa Talbot's full remains were never located. Cadaver dogs were deployed at multiple suspected dump sites and storage locations, but none yielded results. Investigators believe that decomposition and the passage of time, along with deliberate concealment, likely rendered recovery impossible. Nevertheless, prosecutors determined that the forensic evidence, trace DNA, the sealed enclosure, personal belongings, and the confession met the threshold for homicide prosecution. Hatch was denied bail. One lingering question remained: the true identity of Sharon Kruger. No verified person matching that name was ever found. The ID had been faked, the lease signed under false credentials, and no fingerprints tied to any known woman were recovered at the property. Some investigators concluded that Sharon was a fictional character invented to lure Marissa to the location. Others theorized that someone may have posed as Sharon but was unaware of Hatch's intentions. However, no conclusive evidence emerged to confirm either scenario. Hatch refused to elaborate on her identity, stating only that she wasn't around long. The trial of Donald Ray Hatch began on October 2, 2023, at the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas in Dayton, Ohio. The charges included aggravated murder, kidnapping, and unlawful concealment of a corpse in connection with the disappearance and death of 17-year-old Marissa Talbot. prosecutors outlined the timeline, beginning with Marissa's disappearance on October 19, 2019, and ending with Hatch's arrest in West Virginia in May 2023. They presented receipts showing Hatch had purchased drywall screws and caulk within 48 hours of Marissa's last phone signal. Forensic analysts described how the insulation, paint, and materials used to seal the utility closet in the basement all matched items recovered from a storage unit rented by Hatch. Trace DNA from Marissa's skin cells and blood was identified on the necklace and under the drywall seam. Experts testified that the scratches on the wall were consistent with fingernail damage made under duress. Witnesses for the prosecution included former neighbors who confirmed Hatch was regularly present at the Crystal Hollow Road property during the fall of 2019. One stated that he often saw Hatch entering and exiting through a rear basement entrance. Another recalled hearing construction-like noises during the days following Marissa's disappearance. Crime scene photographs showed the chalk writing, "Marissa T." on the back wall of the sealed cavity. The tin box with Marissa's personal effects was entered into evidence. Psychological testimony indicated that Hatch had shown a pattern of controlling behavior in previous relationships, and that his transient lifestyle and use of false identities allowed him to avoid detection for years.
Don't buy anywhere else until you come see me, the Giant, at Subaru of Wesley Chapel, like the Forester
relationships, and that his transient lifestyle and use of false identities allowed him to avoid detection for years. The pawnshop slip, dated March 2020, was introduced, tying Hatch to the sale of a necklace nearly identical to the one found in the basement. Surveillance footage from that transaction was played for the jury. Under cross-examination, the defense could not explain why Hatch retained Marissa's SIM card, why he had pawned her necklace, or why he had used false names in multiple states for years after the incident. When asked why Hatch had never reported the death, the defense replied only that he had shut down emotionally. The defense called no expert witnesses and did not offer an alternative theory of events beyond accidental death. In the trial's final stage, closing arguments crystallized the prosecution's narrative. Prosecutor Rowe reminded jurors of the timeline, the blood evidence, the scratches on the wall, and the name written in chalk. She argued that Hatch had confined a teenage girl, sealed her alive, and concealed the space with deliberate materials he purchased within days of the disappearance. She displayed photographs of the basement wall, with Marissa T. written across concrete in faint, uneven chalk lines. According to courtroom observers, the jury room fell silent as the image was projected. Several jurors were seen wiping away tears. After 6 days of testimony and 1 day of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict. Donald Ray Hatch was found guilty on all counts. On October 12, 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no visible reaction during sentencing. The judge, in brief closing remarks, acknowledged the absence of a body but stated that the weight of evidence left no room for doubt. In the aftermath, a civil suit was filed against the original landlord of the Crystal Hollow Road property. The suit alleged negligence in failing to verify the identity of the tenant leasing under the name Sharon Kruger and for allowing an unvetted individual to reside in the trailer behind the home. The house itself was sold again in early 2024 to a new owner.